Chapter 35, Chapter 5, Part V. Poisoned Factory. 3:59 a.m. The room on the other side was large and circular. Mario and the others quickly realized they were standing on a grate just like the one in the room where they had battled the putrid piranhas. That was the only floor in the room, they could see through it all the way down to the completely flooded bottom floor, and it was a very long drop. What really held their attention, however, was the enormous metal tank on the other side of the room, as well as the person standing in front of it.
"There you are,"
Mario said in a low voice. Bulbin immediately turned around and looked at the team, trying to appear surprised.
"Oh, Mario. You and your friends made it after all,"
he said.
"I guess you really are as strong as they say. Thank goodness."
He put on an innocent smile, and Mario thought it was the most disgusting thing he had ever seen.
"It almost pains me to tell you that I've been playing you all this time." "Stop fooling around, Bulbin,"
Mario snarled at him, clenching his fists.
"We already know the whole truth. We know what you've been doing here and we know what you did to Maisie."
The mayor frowned slightly.
"Is that so? Well, that hardly matters. You still couldn't stop me and you're still not getting out of here alive."
He took a few steps toward them, causing them all to instinctively strike battle stances. He openly scoffed at this.
"You want to fight me? You don't understand, do you? I have enough power in this room to end all your games in a heartbeat. Although, if you all were to leave right now and pretend you never saw any of this, I might be inclined to leave you alone." "Yeah, right,"
Hanner snarled at him.
"We're not going anywhere. We know you've got a sun soul in here, and we're not leaving without it."
Bulbin stared at her for a moment before he seemed to realize what she was talking about.
"Oh, yes, I'd almost forgotten about that. This is what you came for."
Suddenly there came a glowing from somewhere behind the large metal tank. Mario's party all stared warily up at it, and their eyes widened as the source of the glowing suddenly rose up and appeared before them. It was an absolutely stunning sun soul, colored a deep, majestic bluish green. It gave off a brilliant light as it hovered on top of the metal tank, too far away for Mario's team to reach.
"No, I can't imagine I'll let you have this, Mario,"
Bulbin said conversationally.
"I should thank you, though. After I defeat you and your friends, I'll be able to take all of your sun souls for myself. That should save me quite a bit of trouble, even if Maisie completely failed at the job I gave her."
Mario was too furious to respond. Even now, Bulbin was using the same friendly, innocent mannerisms he used when he was masquerading in front of his village. How could he be so nonchalant about this? Mario would have preferred it if he had been gloating.
"Maisie was the only one before you to find out my little secret, you know,"
he went on.
"And I suppose you saw what I did to her just a while ago. So unless you want to end up like her—" "That's enough out of you, Bulbin,"
came a voice, and suddenly Maisie stepped out from behind Mario, very much alive. Bulbin took one look at her, and for the first time, his calm facade started to falter.
You, what are you doing here?"
he cried, his eyes wide with disbelief.
So you. How could you have survived that? You're nothing but a pathetic little flower."
Mario scoffed at him.
"Not hardly. She's not just a flower, she's a mother. You really have no idea how dangerous they are, do you?" "I'm putting an end to this now, Bulbin."
Maisie snapped at him, her voice seething with the anger and hatred she had been unable to act on until now.
"For too long now I've been your willing pawn. For too long I've stood back and watched as you did these unspeakable things at the expense of innocent people like Mario and his friends. But it all ends here. You're going to pay for what you did to my home and what you did to my son."
Hanner let out a low whistle.
"That is one awesome lady." "I think Diavelli was less scary than her,"
Julia agreed. Bulbin just glared at her for a long moment before he seemed to collect himself again.
"Big words, Maisie," he chided. "But I'm afraid you and Mario are both too late. Mario, you do remember what I told you Maisie was doing in here, don't you? Experimenting with ingesting poison and all that."
Mario just glared at him.
"Yes, I'm sure you remember. Well, obviously there was a grain of truth to that. That is exactly what I've been doing in here, after all. And I've come to the conclusion that there's simply no way to avoid the mental detriment that comes with ingesting this poison. But knowing you would come in here trying to stop me at any moment, I decided to risk it and ingested it anyway."
Mario's team had not been expecting that.
You what?
Mario cried, aghast.
Are you mad?
Maisie protested.
Oh, quite possibly. Yes, I have quite a bit of it inside of me right now,
he said in a completely calm, matter-of-fact voice.
I imagine you'll all be no match for me once the effects kick in. Oh yes. It's starting right now. I can feel it.
Mario and his friends automatically stepped backwards, staring at the mayor in horror as a pained look suddenly crossed his face and he began to groan. Mario supposed they should have done something to stop him, but they were all too terrified to make a move. His groaning grew louder and more pained. And then suddenly, he began to balloon in size. His collar and his hat snapped off as he grew and grew, sprouting a set of fangs as his skin changed color to more closely match the poison surrounding them. His blue flower turned into something out of a horror story, growing a long snout along with its own set of fangs. Finally the growing stopped, and Mario's team found themselves staring up in terror at the mutated bubble towering over him. He was drooling poison had an insane look in his eyes, suggesting he wasn't exactly thinking logically anymore.
Oh my goodness!
Maisie whispered, looking as frightened as everyone else.
He's gone too far this time. This is unforgivable. We gotta fight him?
Stubba whimpered. Never within his short life, not even within the past few weeks, had he come across someone as bad as this. This was a whole new class of villain.
Get ready, you guys,
Mario muttered, pulling out his hammer. The transformed mayor let out a horrible, booming laugh, signaling that he was ready and able to bring their games to a swift and painful end. Gwynplaine was actually shaking as he pulled his phone out.
Okay guys. As of a few seconds ago, this thing's called Toxic Bulbin. He can attack us by spitting up a bunch of poison or by chomping down at us with that big flower. And he can restore his health if it gets low, so you had better not give him the chance to do it. Ugh. I can already tell this is gonna be a great fight,
Hannah groaned. Before she or any of the others could make a move, Toxic Bulbin stomped over to them and spewed out a glob of poison. Everyone screamed and jumped out of the way, and the poison landed on the ground with an ugly hiss.
That stuff looks like it could melt your skin off,
Mario said in horror as everyone stared at it.
This is not good.
Looking angry and determined, Maisie quickly stepped forward and performed the loudest lullaby she could. Toxic Bulbin recoiled in physical pain at the sound of it, briefly looking drowsy but quickly shaking it off. He wasn't going to be taken down that easily. The flower on his head suddenly rushed down to take a bite out of her, but she quickly jumped out of the way. While he was distracted with her, Mario and the others ran up and prepared to attack as well. Mario threw himself into the air and performed a violent power bounce on the giant bulb, which proved to be a mistake when his flower grabbed Mario by the leg and hurled him across the room.
Mario!
Screamed several of his partners as he came crashing to the ground. He groaned, trying to steady himself. He wasn't poisoned, but that luck wouldn't hold out for long. He lifted his head up to see most of the partners running over to him, except for Hannah, who was keeping Toxic Bulbin at bay by hurling hammer after hammer until her arm was sore. He didn't seem to be bothered by them, though, and just growled in annoyance at her.
Guys, I'm fine. Go help her.
Mario shouted, but it was too late. He heard Hannah scream and looked over to her just in time to see her jump into her shell as Toxic Bulbin spat an enormous glob of poison at her, completely coating her.
Oh no, Hannah!
He screamed, scrambling over and praying that stuff wouldn't eat through her shell.
Somebody help me get her out of here. I'll take care of Bulbin, Mario.
He turned to find Maisie standing next to him.
He's my responsibility. You worry about her.
Mario reluctantly nodded and crouched over Hannah as she slowly withdrew from her shell. He sighed in relief as he saw she looked fine.
Yuck! I need a bath,
she groaned. Meanwhile, Maisie was trying to keep Toxic Bulbin distracted by singing at him again and again, driving him backwards. Finally, the effects seemed to kick in and he started to stagger around drowsily, struggling to keep his eyes open. Unfortunately, this had the unintended side effect of throwing off his aim.
Mario!
Maisie cried as Bulbin spat out a poisonous glob. Its aim went wild and it flew right at Mario. Mario's eyes bulged. He didn't have time to get away, but then Maisie shoved him out of the way and the poison splattered onto her instead.
Maisie!
he gasped, but although she winced in discomfort, she didn't look affected at all. Then suddenly, she produced a handful of what looked like sparkling blue pollen and blew it right in Mario's face. Caught completely by surprise, Mario let out a violent sneeze as the pollen settled on him. He suddenly felt lightheaded. What had she done?
He can't poison me, Mario,
she reminded him as she rubbed the sludge off of herself.
And as long as I'm here, he can't poison you either.
Mario blinked as he realized she had just used hay fever on him.
Thanks, Maisie,
he said, quickly turning his attention back to the battle.
You would better do that to the other guys too. I don't want any of us getting poisoned from that.
Toxic Bulbin looked displeased with this turn of events. He growled dangerously at Mario and Maisie before advancing on them, only to be stopped by the other partners. Snatchel came up from the side and rammed into him with all his strength, causing him to gasp in pain and almost tipping him over. Stubba joined in by clubbing him as hard as he could, angrily screaming at the top of his lungs.
Both of you, get out of there!
Maisie shouted at them. Sure enough, Toxic Bulbin immediately turned his attention to the two of them, looking furious. His flower snapped down at them with the intention of biting them in half, and they just barely ran out of the way in time. Maisie had to jump in and make Bulbin pause with another lullaby.
If you're going to attack him like that, don't be so reckless.
She scolded the other two as she turned to face them.
Don't you realize how dangerous it is? You're going to get yourselves killed.
Snatchel started blushing.
Sorry.
Maisie shook her head and blew a handful of hay fever pollen on them. While she called the other partners over and gave them similar treatment, Mario realized he was the only one to keep Toxic Bulbin distracted. He immediately ran up and started power smashing with all his might, desperately trying to keep the bulb's attention away from Maisie. It definitely worked. Bulbin bellowed in fury and spat a mouthful of poison at Mario at point-blank range, covering him from head to toe. Mario groaned in disgust, but luckily, what should have been enough to lethally poison him had no effect at all. He sighed in relief. Meanwhile, all the partners had started to gang up on Toxic Bulbin at once. Gumblane was multi-bonking him in the head while Julia followed suit with a head missile. Snatchel had his lasso around the flower's mouth so it couldn't go taking a bite out of anyone. It didn't work out very long. Bulbin suddenly screamed in fury and went completely berserk, throwing all the partners off of him with one good swipe. Mario gasped and hurried over to them, only to see Bulbin spit out glob after glob of disgusting sludge at them, determined to finish them once and for all.
Oh crap, fall back!
Mario shouted, and everyone scrambled to get out of his range. He continued bellowing what were probably threats at them as he spat out more and more poison, which covered the grate they were standing on and started eating away at it with an ominous hissing. Mario and the others tried to figure out a way to attack him, but he was attacking so wildly they didn't even have a safe window.
What does he think he's doing? He's not even trying to hit us.
Julia said in confusion.
He's not aiming for us.
Mario suddenly realized as he glanced down at the floor.
He's trying to corrode the floor away. He's going to make us all fall to our deaths.
Stubba started panicking.
What?
He cried, clinging onto Mario in fear.
We gotta stop him. We can't even do that unless he slows down somehow. Which I don't think he will,
Hanner said quietly. Mario continued to watch the spectacle in fright until he finally got an idea.
Then I say we slow him down ourselves,
he decided, turning to Stubba.
Stubba? You ready? Oh yeah.
The little clubber said determinedly. Both of them grabbed hands and valiantly raced forward.
Freeze frame.
Toxic Bulbin briefly stopped what he was doing, gazing in confusion at the shining frame of green light that had suddenly materialized around him. He glared at it warily as it surrounded him, unsure of what to do. And then it gave out a blinding flash, and he was frozen in place.
Yes. We did it.
Mario cheered.
Come on guys, now's our chance.
The entire team came charging forward and unleashed their most powerful attacks on the defenseless Bulbin. Along with Gumblane, Mario was power bouncing on his head as hard as he possibly could, grunting with the effort as he used up every reserve of his energy. The effect only lasted for a moment, but by the time Bulbin returned to normal and furiously sent everyone flying off of him, the damage had been done.
I think it's working, everyone. He's running out of energy.
Maisie announced. Sure enough, Bulbin was visibly panting in exhaustion, looking like he would fall over at any moment. Mario grinned in triumph. But then Bulbin suddenly backed up until he was standing right in front of the metal tank. The smile fell from Mario's face as he watched in confusion. And then his jaw dropped as a rain of poison suddenly came out of a showerhead attached to the tank that he hadn't even noticed before. Bulbin was completely drenched in it, and it had the opposite effect it would have had on a normal person. Within seconds, he was at full strength and grinned crazily at the group.
What?
Hannah cried.
Oh, come on. That's completely unfair. I'm pretty sure he doesn't care about that, Hannah,
said Mario.
Whatever. This just means we can pound him even more.
Gumblane snarled, not looking concerned. He raced back into the battle, the others reluctantly following after him. The battle continued, but while Mario and the others were fighting like a true team, it still wasn't enough. Whenever Toxic Bulbin got low on energy, he'd just walk under the tank and recover his energy with another spray of poison. This happened again and again, and no matter how hard they tried, Mario's team just couldn't seem to get an edge on him.
This ain't workin', Mario,
Snatchel groaned after a long while.
Whenever we bang him up, he just goes and heals himself. I know. You're right,
Mario sighed, fighting back exhaustion as he swayed on his feet. If only they could get rid of that tank somehow, Bulbin would be defenseless, but there was no possible way they could reach it safely. He felt his shoulders sagging in defeat.
It's useless. We can't do this. Maybe not, but we can.
Mario's head jerked up.
What they?
Suddenly there came a loud, creaking groan from the tank. It took Mario a moment to realize that it was tipping over.
Holy cow! Get back, everybody!
He cried as he grabbed Stubba, who was closest to him, and scrambled backwards. Everyone else yelped in alarm and did likewise, and not a moment too soon. The tank fell over on its side with a crash that shook the whole floor, spilling the poison out and leaving it completely unusable. Standing on the side of the tank were at least a dozen of the citizens of Viney Valley, led by Polina and Fidelity.
Hello.
Polina sang cheerfully as they all hopped off and ran to join Mario.
I hope we're not too late.
Mario stared at them.
What are you all doing here? We followed you,
Fidela said simply.
You were right about us, Mario. We've been having problems, but that's because we couldn't bring ourselves to face them head on.
Mario blinked.
Oh. Yeah. And when we saw you guys going off to the factory by yourselves, we knew we couldn't sit back and let a bunch of complete strangers fight our battles for us.
Said another Daisy, shaking his head vehemently.
No way. You really got through to us, Mario. We're not taking this anymore. We're helping you save Viney Valley. So where's Maisie so we can tear her a new one?
Polina said angrily. Maisie frowned.
I'm right here.
Polina turned and stared at her.
You're... What?
Mario sighed.
Guys, she's with us, okay?
He said.
I know it doesn't make sense, but we'll explain later. Just help us deal with Bulbin right now.
Bulbin was not pleased about this. And he was not at all pleased that he had just lost his only means of healing himself. He let out a furious roar, causing the new arrivals to spin around and get a good look at him for the first time.
Eek! What happened to him?
Polina cried.
Nothing that a good butt-whoopin' can't fix,
Gumblane growled, charging forward to attack. Everyone else followed after him, fueled with confidence now that Bulbin was on his last legs. The giant bubble roared at them in a rage, but they weren't afraid of him anymore. Maisie led the attack as she unleashed a devastating lullaby, disorienting and confusing him but making him even angrier in the process. Hannah and Stubba fought with their weapons, Gumblane jumped on him, Snatchel rammed into him, and Dulia threw up a plasma shield whenever he attempted to attack one of her friends. Mario just did what he did best and gripped his hammer, swinging it at Bulbin and striking him clear across the face. And finally, it seemed to do the trick. Bulbin started swaying, breaking off his attacks on the group and going cross-eyed as he struggled to remain standing. Mario and his friends quickly backed safely out of the way, watching as he staggered and stumbled before finally falling over and crashing down onto the grate. The team watched him warily until they realized he wasn't going to attack them anymore, then finally relaxed a little.
I guess this means we beat him,
Hannah finally said.
Thank goodness,
Stubb aside.
that was really scary. I'll say. I was really worried there for a while,
Delia agreed. Mario was still looking at Bulbin. He was lying on his side, completely exhausted and seemingly unable to get back up. In fact, he looked totally helpless now. He could only glare at Mario and the others, and he couldn't do a thing to defend himself. Mario looked at him in disgust. After everything he's done, and now he's powerless. He's completely pathetic.
Okay, guys. Let's finish him.
He grabbed his hammer and was about to step forward, when suddenly he thought of something and quickly stopped.
On second thought. Maisie, why don't you do the honors?
All the other partners nodded, looking eager to finally see Bulbin come to justice. Maisie, on the other hand, looked shocked as she saw the others watching her expectantly. She instantly lost what confidence she had had, looking completely unsure of what to do. Her gaze went back and forth between Bulbin and the others. And then finally, she lowered her head and shook it.
No, I won't do it.
Everyone looked at her in surprise.
But Maisie,
Maisie shook her head again and Mario fell silent.
I hate Bulbin for what he almost made me become, Mario. It was bad enough that I had to fight you all those times. But I could never bring myself to hurt someone if they couldn't defend themselves. I'm certainly not going to finish him now. Not when he's like this.
She turned to glare at him.
You hear me, Bulbin? I'm sparing you. Maybe this way you'll have a chance to do something good with yourself.
For a moment, Bulbin just glared silently at her, his sides heaving as he struggled to breathe. It was unclear whether or not he even understood her. But in the end it didn't matter. Whatever offer she had given him, he rejected it. He surprised everyone with a deafening roar as he summoned the last of his energy and threw himself at her. Maisie gasped and everyone screamed, but she couldn't get out of the way in time. And then the floor gave out.
Ack!
Hannah cried, her hands flying to her mouth. Bulbin's attempt to weaken the floor had worked after all, and it bent and broke underneath him. Maisie watched in terror as he plummeted down, and finally a loud splash from the bottom floor told everyone he had made it all the way down.
No.
Mario and the others hanged back nervously as Maisie dashed over to the place where he had fallen, a horrified look in her eyes. Everyone was deathly silent as she peered over the edge of the floor. For a long moment she was silent. And then her shoulders sagged.
He's gone,
was all she said. Mario exchanged a look with his partners. They looked stunned, frightened, or upset. But none of them looked happy. Finally, he walked up to Maisie and put a hand on her shoulder.
Maisie! Don't feel bad. It wasn't your fault.
She nodded, though she didn't turn to face him.
I know, Mario.
Now everyone else was staring down as well.
I can't believe that guy was our mayor,
Polina said with a shudder.
That's so totally freaky. I can't believe none of us ever realized what he was truly like,
Fidela sighed.
If only we had all been wiser, we could have prevented this. Yeah, you chumps are all total morons,
Gwynplaine agreed wholeheartedly. Mario glared at him and was about to open his mouth to give him a reprimand, when he was cut off by the floor beginning to shake. Everyone froze up.
Oh great! What's going on?
Mario groaned.
Oh no!
Said Maisie, peering over the edge of the floor again.
When Bulbin fell, the impact must have caused the entire factory to start to collapse. Everyone, we have to leave or we'll all be crushed. Eek! Everybody run!
Polina shrieked, running out the door as the rumbling grew stronger. Everyone else started screaming in panic and followed after her, and Mario was about to do the same, when the Sun Soul. He spun around, and sure enough, the Sun Soul was now floating a few inches off the ground where Bulbin had stood, forgotten amidst the chaos. He panicked and started running over to it, ignoring everyone else fleeing in the opposite direction.
Mario! What are you doing?
Hannah cried.
Mario, we have to get out of here now.
Maisie shouted at him.
But the Sun Soul.
Mario protested desperately.
We can't leave without.
He was cut off as an enormous pipe suddenly crashed to the ground directly in front of him, hissing violently and spewing out steam. He cried out and staggered backwards, desperately trying to make out the sun's soul through the cloud of steam. But it was useless. He was too late. There wasn't a thing he could do, except watch in anguish as more and more twisted hunks of metal began crashing down around him. He was so upset he hardly even noticed Snatchel grabbing him by the wrist and hauling him out the door in the last instant before the entire ceiling caved in. The next several minutes were a complete blur. Mario's team, and everyone from Viney Valley, fled backwards through the factory as fast as they possibly could, even as they were surrounded by deafening crashes and hisses and the whole building started collapsing around them. Stubba was wailing and sobbing in fright as Hanner desperately pulled him along, and Gwynplaine was callously shoving everyone out of the way as he struggled to get ahead.
Everyone, follow me. I know how to get out of here.
Came Maisie's voice from somewhere near the front of the group, but all the smoke and steam was making it impossible for Mario to see where she was. He groped blindly along, trying to follow everyone's voice as they scrambled down 1, 2, 3 flights of stairs.
Guys! Wait for me!
He shouted as he ran, though he was sure nobody could hear him. Now red lights were flashing and alarms were blaring.
Please wait.
Before he even made it to the bottom floor, the constant rumbling suddenly erupted into a violent lurch, throwing Mario off his feet and sending him tumbling head over heels down the stairs and crashing to the ground.
Oh!
He groaned, weakly lifting his head up and looking around frantically. He couldn't see anybody else. They couldn't have left him, could they? They had to realize he was gone.
Guys? Where are you? Guys? I can't.
Suddenly he felt himself being hauled to his feet.
Wouldn't do to have you get lost in a place like this, would it?
Came Fidella's voice from right next to him.
Come on, Mr. Mario. We're almost there,
said Polina. So the three of them took off, charging over to the door that led outside and racing through the now deserted courtyard. They ran back into the front part of the factory, where the rest of the group was still fighting to make their way through.
This is ridiculous!
Hanner shouted, frantically swinging her hammer at a group of poison puffs that were trying to block off their escape.
Mario! You're here!
Stubba cried in relief as he saw the plumber approach.
Yeah, I'm here,
said Mario, quickly pulling out his hammer.
Now let's take care of this.
By the time he had finished off all the poison puffs, they were almost out of time. The shaking was getting stronger and ceiling lights were beginning to fall to the ground as they ran, shattering and sending up sparks. Maisie continued to lead the way as they ran frantically through the maze of conveyor belts, which were starting to malfunction and send up smoke. Mario was completely blinded, not knowing how close they were, whether they would make it or not, whether this was the end. Trickleback River. 2:59 a.m. And then finally they reached the front door and came charging out. Mario felt the cold outside air hit him in the face as they raced across the stone bridge to the other side of the lake without looking back, only stopping when they were as far away as possible. As Mario paused to catch his breath, he suddenly heard a series of deafening crashes coming from behind him. His partners drew closely together in fear, watching the spectacle. Mario turned around in time to see the entire building come crashing down on itself, the upper floors collapsing into the lower ones and the smokestacks crumbling to the ground. He winced, closing his eyes and covering his ears. There was one horrible crash. And then it was over. Slowly, cautiously, he opened his eyes. Everyone gazed out at the place where the poison factory once stood. Now it was nothing more than an enormous, sprawling pile of metal and rubble, beyond repair and without the capacity to harm anyone ever again.
It's gone,
Julia said quietly.
The whole thing is gone.
Maisie stared at it for a long moment before bowing her head solemnly.
And may that be the last we ever hear of it,
she sighed.
We're not gonna have to pay for this, are we?
Polina asked uneasily. Hearing her voice made Mario remember what else he had been meaning to say. He walked over to the citizens of Viney Valley, who were all crowded together.
You guys saved us,
he addressed them with a broad smile.
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.
Polina chirruped happily. Fidela just rolled his eyes at her.
We're the ones who should be thanking you, Mario,
said the toad.
If you and your friends hadn't come along, well, we'd all be goners. But Viney Valley saved now, thanks to you.
Mario's smile suddenly fell from his face as he remembered something.
Yeah, but...
He felt his heart sink.
We still didn't get what we came here for.
He gazed sadly at his partners.
The Sun Soul. We couldn't save it.
Polina suddenly brightened up even more.
Oh. You mean this thing?
And she reached behind herself and pulled it out, holding it out for Mario to see. The plumber, and Fidela, stared at her in shock.
But how'd you get that thing? Beats me,
she said with a shrug.
But if you want it, go ahead and take it, Mr. Mario. You totally deserve it.
Fidela sighed.
She's right, Mario,
he said.
We all owe you our lives. This thing is the very least you deserve.
Finally Mario decided not to question it and just shook his head.
Thank you, guys,
he said graciously, walking up and taking the Sun Soul from Polina.
But as a matter of fact, I'm not the one you should be giving it to.
Without another word, he turned around and opened his hands. By now glowing fiercely and brilliantly, the Sun Soul floated away from him. His other partners smiled and stepped backwards as they saw it. But Maisie, who was staring at it with wide eyes, was frozen in place.
Mario? What's going on?
She asked timidly, entranced by its glow.
This is your Sun Soul, but... what is it doing over here? Over. With me.
And then she seemed to understand.
No, it can't be. Oh, sure it can.
Delia giggled.
You're the nicest person we ever met, Maisie. You're gonna be the best guardian ever. Isn't that something?
Mario said with an ironic smile.
You told us you wanted all the Sun Souls for yourself. And this one belonged to you the whole time.
Maisie just stared at him.
But you can't possibly. No, there must be some mistake. I don't deserve an honor like this. Maisie, I can't think of anyone more deserving than you,
said Mario, meaning every word of it.
Yeah, and it's not like you have a choice. You're one of us whether you like it or not,
Hannah said with an evil grin. Maisie was almost completely overcome. She felt the tears welling up as she stared at the Sun Soul that was floating expectantly in front of her, aware of everyone watching her. This couldn't possibly be true. And yet... Realizing it was what they were waiting for, she reluctantly reached out and took the Sun Soul in her hands. And she was immediately hit with the indescribable joy that was beaming out of it now that they were finally together. Finally, she was able to look back up at Mario and his friends. Her friends.
Oh. Mario.
She managed through her tears.
I swear to you, I'll work every minute to earn your trust in me. I'll never leave your side again. I promise. Aw geez, lighten up already, would you? We all love you and stuff,
said Hannah, giving her a hug.
Hey everybody! Look up there,
Snatchel suddenly said, pointing up at the sky. Everyone looked up where he was pointing and gasped. Now that the factory was gone, the dark, stifling clouds that had covered up the sky this whole time were finally beginning to dissipate. All of a sudden, everything was becoming bright and clear again, and the brilliant stars were shining down, lighting up the world around them.
Wow! Look at all the stars,
Stubba said quietly, craning his head up as he gazed in fascination at the enormous sky.
They're so pretty.
Maisie was smiling.
And they wouldn't be here now if it weren't for all of you. Thank you, Mario. Thank you, everyone.
Mario just gave her a nod.
Now let's go find your son,
he said as the final traces of cloud and smoke left the sky. And for the first time in ages, the stars shone on Viney Valley. Mario found the Eve Soul. His star power is now 5. With Maisie's help, he can now use the special move, Clean Sweep. End of chapter. The 5th Sun Soul had been hidden deep within the deadly poisoned factory. But Mario successfully put an end to the horrible place, saving the town of Viney Valley from a cruel fate. It would not be long before Viney Valley was restored to its former beauty. But what lies in store for Mario now? With only one Sun Soul now remaining, what new dangers await our hero? To be continued. End of chapter.